Chinese military strategists conducted classified war games in 2023 simulating Pacific dominance scenarios. The results included one variable that consistently disrupted Chinese victory: the combined resistance of Australia and Japan. Not America intervening from Hawaii. Not NATO rushing to the rescue. Just two Indo-Pacific democracies, one controlling the southern gateway to Asia, the other the northern anchor of the first island chain, creating a defensive partnership so militarily capable and geographically positioned that Chinese planners concluded Pacific hegemony was impossible as long as the Australia-Japan alliance remained intact. Beijing's worst nightmare isn't American carriers or British submarines. It's Tokyo and Canberra deciding that their survival depends on stopping China together, regardless of what Washington decides. And that nightmare is becoming reality. Welcome to Doctrine of War, where we analyze the military partnerships that terrify authoritarian regimes and expose the weaknesses in their expansion plans. The Australia-Japan security relationship has quietly evolved from diplomatic courtesy into one of the most strategically significant military partnerships in the world, combining Australian geographic control, resources, and AUKUS nuclear submarines with Japanese technological sophistication, massive defense budget, and forward-deployed forces that sit astride every route China needs to project power. Today we're examining whether Australia and Japan together possess the military capability and strategic positioning to genuinely challenge Chinese ambitions in the Pacific, what specific advantages each nation brings that China cannot counter, and why Xi Jinping's regime views this partnership as existential threat to Chinese regional dominance. And what you're about to discover is that the combination of Australian fighting spirit and Japanese precision creates a force that Beijing fears more than any other regional challenge: the geographic stranglehold. How Australia and Japan control every route China needs. The foundation of Australia-Japan strategic partnership isn't just military capability, it's geographic reality that gives these two nations control over the maritime and air spaces that China absolutely must transit to become a genuine Pacific power. Understanding this geography reveals why Beijing views the Australia-Japan alliance as intolerable obstacles to Chinese ambitions and why these two democracies hold leverage that exceeds what their population sizes or economies would suggest. Japan's geographic position is China's permanent strategic curse. The Japanese archipelago sits directly between Chinese coastal waters and the open Pacific like a chain across a doorway, controlling the straits through which Chinese naval vessels must pass to reach international waters. The Miyako Strait between Okinawa and Miyako Island, the Tsushima Strait between Japan and Korea, the Tsugaru Strait between Japanese main islands. Every one represents a choke point where Japanese forces with home field advantage can monitor, track, and threaten any Chinese vessel attempting to break out into the Pacific. Chinese naval strategists call this the first island chain problem, and it's why China has never been able to achieve the kind of unrestricted Pacific access that a genuine great power requires. Japan doesn't need to defeat the Chinese Navy in pitched battle. Japan just needs to control these straits, and Chinese naval power remains bottled up in waters where American and Allied submarines can hunt at will. Australia's geographic position complements Japan's northern stranglehold by controlling the southern approaches to Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean routes that carry China's energy lifeline. Every drop of oil that China imports from the Middle East, and that's roughly 80% of Chinese oil consumption, transits waters near Australia or through straits where Australian forces operate. The Malacca Strait, Sunda Strait, Lombok Strait, all represent potential choke points where Australian submarines and aircraft based from northern Australian bases could interdict Chinese shipping in any conflict scenario. China cannot feed its industry, power its military, or sustain its economy without energy imports that flow through waters where Australia possesses geographic advantage. This creates leverage that no amount of Chinese military buildup can fully overcome because geography doesn't change with defense budgets. The combined Australia-Japan geographic control creates an arc from the Indian Ocean through Southeast Asia to the Western Pacific that completely encompasses the maritime space China needs to operate as a global power. If you draw lines on a map connecting Australian territory through Indonesia to Japanese islands, you create a barrier that China must somehow break through to project power beyond the first island chain. Neither Australia nor Japan alone could maintain this barrier against determined Chinese pressure. But together, with mutual support and coordinated operations, they created a defensive position that would require China to fight simultaneous campaigns across thousands of kilometers of ocean against adversaries operating from prepared bases with supply lines far shorter than Chinese forces could maintain. The air defense integration between Australia and Japan creates overlapping coverage that makes Chinese bomber operations and air superiority missions throughout the region extraordinarily difficult. Japanese F-35 fighters operating from bases throughout the Japanese archipelago can intercept Chinese aircraft attempting to break out into the Pacific. Australian F-35s and Super Hornets based in Darwin, Tyndall, and other northern bases can cover approaches to Southeast Asia and the South China Sea. The surveillance networks that both nations maintain, Japanese early warning radars, Australian Wedgetail AWACS aircraft, American satellite coverage that both nations access, create integrated air picture that makes surprise Chinese air operations virtually impossible. China would need to suppress air defenses across an area stretching thousands of kilometers while simultaneously conducting offensive operations, a mission that exceeds even Chinese military capability against competent adversaries operating from defensive positions. If you're starting to see why Chinese military planners obsess about the Japan-Australia alliance in ways they don't worry about other regional threats, you're understanding exactly why the doctrine of war exists. We reveal the geographic and strategic realities that determine power regardless of propaganda. Hit that subscribe button and notifications because what we're about to show you about combined Australian-Japanese military capabilities will make clear why Beijing has reason to fear this partnership achieving what seemed impossible, containing Chinese expansion without requiring American intervention. The submarine threat that Australia and Japan create together represents China's most serious naval vulnerability. Japan operates one of the world's most sophisticated submarine forces, 22 ultra-quiet conventional submarines manned by crews that train constantly and maintain readiness levels that equal or exceed any submarine force in the world. Australian submarines, currently Collins-class conventional boats but soon to be nuclear-powered AUKUS submarines, provide complementary capability in southern approaches. Combined, these submarine forces could create an underwater barrier where Chinese surface vessels operate under constant threat of torpedo attack, where Chinese submarines face adversaries that can detect and destroy them, and where Chinese confidence in operating beyond the first island chain evaporates because the losses would be catastrophic. The anti-ship missile arsenals that both nations are rapidly expanding create standoff threats that the Chinese Navy must defend against across the entire theater. Japan is deploying anti-ship missiles on islands throughout the Ryukyu chain, creating kill zones where Chinese surface vessels cannot safely operate. Australia is acquiring long-range anti-ship missiles including RASM and naval strike missile that can be launched from aircraft, ships, and potentially ground-based launchers. These weapons allow both nations to threaten Chinese vessels at ranges where Chinese weapons struggle to reach, creating an asymmetric advantage where smaller numbers of defenders can threaten larger attacking forces before those forces can close to effective combat range. The logistics advantage that geography provides Australia and Japan cannot be overstated. Both nations would fight from home bases with short supply lines, established infrastructure, and support from civilian populations. Chinese forces attempting to operate in the same waters would be thousands of kilometers from Chinese ports, dependent on vulnerable supply lines that submarines and aircraft can attack, and unable to sustain the kind of high-intensity operations that modern combat requires. Wars are won by logistics and firepower. The logistics equation in Pacific waters heavily favors defenders operating from established bases over attackers operating at extreme range from home territory. The intelligence cooperation through various frameworks including trilateral partnerships with the United States gives both Australia and Japan access to information about Chinese military movements, capabilities, and intentions that smaller nations operating independently could never collect. Australian surveillance of southern approaches combined with Japanese monitoring of northern waters creates comprehensive coverage of Chinese naval activities throughout the region. Neither nation needs to guess where Chinese forces are or what they're doing. They know in real time with enough detail to plan responses and position forces for maximum effectiveness. This intelligence advantage means Chinese forces cannot achieve operational surprise, cannot hide their movements, and cannot conduct operations without defenders knowing immediately and responding accordingly. Combined military power, capabilities that complement and multiply. The question of whether Australia and Japan can challenge China isn't just about geography, it's about whether combined military capabilities of these two nations create sufficient combat power to actually resist Chinese aggression and impose costs that make Chinese expansion strategically irrational. The answer requires honest assessment of what each nation brings militarily and how those capabilities combine into something greater than individual national forces. Japan's maritime self-defense force represents one of the most capable navies in the world despite constitutional restrictions that officially limit Japan to defensive operations. The Japanese fleet includes helicopter carriers that are being modified to operate F-35B fighters, sophisticated destroyers equipped with Aegis combat systems and ballistic missile defense capabilities, and those ultra-quiet submarines that Chinese planners fear. With the defense budget recently increased to over 2% of GDP, representing over $50 billion annually, Japan is acquiring capabilities including long-range strike weapons, expanded ammunition stockpiles, and hardened facilities designed specifically for sustained conflict with China. This isn't defensive posture. This is preparing to fight and win. Australia's military modernization through AUKUS and independent programs creates complementary capabilities that fill gaps in Japanese force structure while benefiting from Japanese strengths. The nuclear submarines that Australia is acquiring provide endurance and range that Japanese conventional submarines cannot match, allowing Australian boats to operate in distant waters while Japanese submarines defend home approaches. Australian air warfare destroyers with Aegis systems provide fleet air defense that protects combined task forces. Australian long-range strike weapons including Tomahawk cruise missiles give both nations the ability to hit Chinese targets deep in Chinese territory, creating deterrence through the threat of retaliation against the Chinese homeland for any aggression against Japanese or Australian interests. The combined naval power of Australia and Japan creates a fleet that rivals China's in quality even if not in quantity. While China operates more ships total, the combined Australia-Japan fleet includes more modern destroyers and frigates with sophisticated combat systems, more capable submarines with better trained crews, and aircraft including F-35 fighters that Chinese Navy aviation cannot match. In naval combat, quality often trumps quantity. Better sensors detect enemies first, better weapons engage at longer ranges, better training executes complex maneuvers under stress. The Australia-Japan combined fleet possesses advantages in all these areas that Chinese numerical superiority cannot easily overcome, particularly in waters where geographic factors favor defenders. The air-power combination is equally impressive. Japan operates roughly 200 combat aircraft including F-35s, F-15s, and F-2s flown by pilots with some of the highest training standards in the world. Australia operates F-35s, F divided by a -18F Super Hornets, and E-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft with RAF pilots known for aggressive tactics and high proficiency. Together, these forces create air combat capability that could contest Chinese air superiority throughout the first island chain and force Chinese aircraft to fight at disadvantage, operating at extreme range from Chinese bases while Australian and Japanese aircraft operate from nearby bases with full logistics support and advantages that come from defending home airspace. The missile defense cooperation creates layered defense that makes Chinese missile strikes far more difficult and costly. Japanese destroyers with ballistic missile defense capabilities can intercept Chinese missiles in mid-course phase. Australian air defense systems can engage cruise missiles and aircraft in the terminal phase. The combined defense means that Chinese missile strikes, which Beijing relies on as the primary method for achieving quick knockout blows against adversaries, face significant probability of interception, requiring China to expend far more missiles to achieve desired effects and potentially exhausting Chinese missile inventories before accomplishing strategic objectives. The special forces and unconventional warfare capabilities that both nations maintain provide options for operations that don't require full-scale military commitment but can achieve significant strategic effects. Japanese special forces, while not as publicly celebrated as Australian SASR, maintain high proficiency and conduct training that includes scenarios for operations on disputed islands and in denied territory. Australian special forces bring combat experience and capabilities proven in Afghanistan and other conflicts. Combined operations could include raids on Chinese facilities, reconnaissance of Chinese military installations, sabotage of Chinese logistics, and other missions that raise costs of Chinese aggression without requiring pitched battles that risk escalation to full-scale war. The defense-industrial cooperation between Australia and Japan creates sustainability for extended conflict that's essential for any realistic assessment of whether these nations could challenge China. Japan possesses a sophisticated defense industry capable of producing ships, aircraft, missiles, and electronics. Australia is building defense industrial capacity including naval shipbuilding and missile manufacturing. Technology sharing and production cooperation means both nations can sustain operations, replace losses, and maintain readiness even if conflict disrupts global supply chains or if access to American defense articles becomes limited. This industrial cooperation transforms the relationship from just operational coordination into genuine strategic partnership where both nations invest in each other's defense capability. The cyber and electronic warfare cooperation creates capabilities in domains that are increasingly decisive in modern conflict. Japanese cyber capabilities, while less publicly discussed than kinetic military power, are sophisticated and focused on defending critical infrastructure and conducting offensive operations against adversary networks. Australian cyber capabilities through Australian Signals Directorate and Defence Cyber Command create complementary capabilities. Combined, these forces could disrupt Chinese command and control, corrupt Chinese data, and create electromagnetic chaos that degrades Chinese military effectiveness throughout any conflict. The economic leverage that Australia and Japan collectively wield against China creates non-military coercion that complements military capabilities. Australia provides critical resources including iron ore that the Chinese industry depends on. Japan represents a major trading partner and source of technology for China. Combined economic pressure where both nations coordinate restrictions on trade with China, deny Chinese access to critical resources and technology, and use financial tools to isolate the Chinese economy creates costs that might deter Chinese aggression even without military conflict. Beijing cannot feed its military machine, sustain industrial production, or maintain economic growth if both Australia and Japan decide to weaponize economic relationships in coordinated fashion. The political will dimension is where this partnership potentially exceeds what alliances that include less threatened nations can achieve. Both Australia and Japan face direct threats from Chinese expansion. Japan from Chinese claims on the Senkaku Islands and pressure in the East China Sea, Australia from Chinese economic coercion and potential threats to maritime routes that the Australian economy depends on. This shared threat perception creates a political environment in both nations where defense spending, military modernization, and confrontational policies toward China have broad public support. Unlike European nations that debate whether China is really a threat or American political factions that question whether Pacific security matters, Australian and Japanese publics understand viscerally that Chinese domination of the Pacific represents existential threat to their prosperity and security. That's today's analysis of the Doctrine of War. If this examination of whether Australia and Japan can challenge China revealed a partnership more powerful than you realized, let us know in the comments. Could these two nations really contain Chinese expansion without American help? What capabilities matter most for success? And if you want more analysis of military partnerships, strategic geography, and the alliances that will determine Pacific security for generations, subscribe and turn on notifications. We're covering the defense relationships that Beijing fears most because they work. The ultimate answer to whether Australia and Japan can challenge Xi Jinping's China is yes, not through conquering China or defeating Chinese military in total war, but through creating a defensive partnership so capable and well-positioned that Chinese expansion becomes strategically impossible without costs that no rational leadership would accept. Geography gives these nations control over routes China must use. Military capabilities create forces that can inflict devastating losses on Chinese forces operating in defended waters. Economic leverage provides non-military tools for coercion. And political will ensures that both nations maintain defense commitments over years and decades that great power competition requires. China may possess a larger military, more ships, more aircraft, and a greater population. But Australia and Japan together control the geography, possess the technology, maintain the training, and most critically demonstrate the resolve to defend their interests against Chinese pressure. Beijing understands this, which is why Chinese diplomatic and military efforts focus so intensely on dividing this partnership, on creating friction between Tokyo and Canberra, on using economic incentives and political pressure to prevent exactly the kind of coordinated resistance that the Australia-Japan alliance represents. The fact that China works so hard to prevent this partnership from reaching its full potential tells you everything about how much Beijing fears what these two democracies can accomplish together. Until next time, stay strategic.